Jake Collins had been alone for 3 years. 3 long years on a jungle moon called Seven, at the very edge of human space. He lived in a small outpost made of metal and glass, surrounded by trees that glowed blue at night and strange animals that sang in the darkness. He had chosen this life. That was the thing he told himself every morning when he woke up in his empty room. He had asked for this posting. He had wanted to disappear from the world, and he had succeeded. Before Seven, Jake had been a surveyor for the Colonial Authority. It was a good job. He would travel to new planets, study the land, and write reports about what humans might find there. He had a wife named and a daughter named Lily. They were his whole world. They made the long trips worth it because he always had someone to come home to. Then came the day that broke him. And Lily were traveling on a transport ship called the Morning Star. They were coming to meet Jake at a station near the outer colonies. It was supposed to be a surprise. Lily had made a card for him with drawings of their family together. Jake never saw that card. Pirates attacked the Morning Star 2 days before it reached the station. The ship sent out a distress call, but help arrived too late. There were no survivors. The rescue teams found bodies floating in space, frozen and still. They never found Lily. Their bodies were lost among the stars, somewhere in the endless black. Jake remembered getting the news. He remembered falling to his knees. He remembered screaming until his throat was raw. After that, his memories became foggy. There were days he could not recall at all. There were nights he spent staring at the ceiling, wondering why he was still breathing when they were not. The guilt ate at him like a disease. He should have been on that ship. He should have died with them. Or maybe he should have protected them somehow, even though he knew that made no sense. The guilt did not care about logic. It just sat in his chest like a stone, heavy and cold. 6 months after the attack, Jake put in a request for the most remote posting available. The Colonial Authority had a research outpost on Seven that needed someone to maintain it and study the local plants. No one wanted the job. The moon was too far away, too isolated, too lonely. Jake wanted all of those things. They gave him the posting without question. He packed a single bag, left everything else behind, and flew to the edge of known space. When his transport ship left him at the outpost and flew away, he felt something like relief. Out here, no one would ask him how he was doing. No one would look at him with pity in their eyes. No one would remind him of what he had lost. He could finally be alone with his grief. The first year was the hardest. Jake had to learn how to survive on Seven. The jungle was beautiful but dangerous. There were plants that released poison if you touched them wrong. There were animals that hunted at night with teeth like knives. The weather changed without warning, bringing storms that lasted for days. Jake learned. He made mistakes and paid for them with cuts and bruises and one very bad case of fever. But he survived. That was something, even if he was not sure he wanted it to be. By the second year, he had found a rhythm. He woke at dawn, ate breakfast from his supply packs, and spent the morning checking his sensors and equipment. In the afternoon, he walked through the jungle and collected samples of plants and soil. In the evening, he sat on his porch and watched the twin moons rise over the trees. He did not speak to anyone. Supply drones came every 6 months with food and equipment, but they were automated. No pilots, no messages from home, just crates of supplies and then silence again. Jake was fine with that. He had stopped wanting to talk. Words felt useless now. What was there to say? His family was dead. He was alive. That was the whole story, and he did not want to tell it to anyone. The third year brought a kind of peace. Not happiness, but something close to acceptance. Jake stopped crying at night. He stopped dreaming about Lily every time he closed his eyes. He started to feel like maybe he could do this forever, just him and the jungle and the quiet. Then came the night that changed everything. Jake was sitting at his monitoring station, checking the perimeter sensors like he did every evening. The sensors picked up movement from animals all the time. Usually, it was just the local creatures going about their business. Jake would note the readings in his log and move on. But this reading was different. The sensors showed multiple heat signatures about half a kilometer south of his outpost. That was not strange by itself. What was strange was the pattern. One small heat signature was moving fast, like it was running. Behind it, 3 larger signatures were following in a formation. They were chasing something. Jake stared at the screen. His first thought was that it was none of his business. He had come to 7 to be alone, not to get involved in whatever was happening out there. The jungle had its own rules. Things hunted and things were hunted. That was nature. He reached for the button to clear the alert. Then he heard the scream. It cut through the night like a knife. It was high and sharp and filled with fear. But more than that, it was intelligent. This was not the cry of an animal. This was the sound of someone who knew they were in danger, someone who was begging for help. Jake's hand stopped over the button. For a long moment he did not move. The scream came again, fainter now, more desperate. His mind told him to stay inside. He was one man with an old rifle. He did not know what was out there. Getting involved could get him killed. But his body was already moving. He grabbed his pulse rifle from the rack by the door. He pulled on his boots without tying them. He ran out into the darkness, toward the screaming, toward trouble, toward something that would change his life forever. He did not think about why he was doing this. He did not have time to think. All he knew was that someone needed help, and he could not sit in his empty outpost and pretend he did not hear them. The jungle swallowed him up as he ran. Blue light from the glowing plants showed him the path. Strange sounds filled the air around him. His heart pounded in his chest. Jake Collins had spent 3 years running away from life. Tonight, for the first time, he was running toward it. Jake ran through the jungle with his rifle in his hands. The blue glow of the plants lit his way, but the shadows were thick and the ground was uneven. Twice he almost fell. He did not slow down. The screams pulled him forward like a rope tied around his chest. After 5 minutes of hard running, he saw light ahead. Not the soft blue of the jungle plants, but sharp white light from handheld torches. He slowed down and crouched behind a large tree, breathing hard. The clearing in front of him was maybe 20 meters wide. In the center stood a fallen tree covered in moss. Pressed against that tree was a small figure, trapped with nowhere to go. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The figure was not human. That was clear right away. The shape was similar, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but everything else was different. The skin was pale lavender, like the color of flowers at sunset. Strange silver markings covered the skin in patterns that seemed to move and pulse with soft light. The face had large eyes the color of amber, wide with terror. It was a child. Jake was certain of that even though he had never seen this species before. There was something in the way the figure stood, in the smallness of the body, in the fear that had no way to hide itself. This was a young one, maybe the same age his Lily would have been. The thought hit him like a punch to the gut. 3 hunters stood around the child in a half circle, blocking any escape. They wore black armor that covered them from head to toe. Their helmets had red visors that glowed in the darkness. Each one carried a weapon that Jake recognized from his colonial training. Jake had heard of them. Everyone in the outer colonies had heard of them. They were slavers, hunters of living beings. They traveled from system to system, capturing rare and valuable species to sell on black markets. Some of their victims ended up as servants. Some ended up as pets. Some ended up in places too dark to think about. The colonial authority had been fighting them for decades. They were hard to catch and harder to stop. They paid off officials, bribed inspectors, and disappeared whenever the law got too close. And now 3 of them had cornered a child in the jungle, half a kilometer from Jake's outpost. One of the hunters stepped forward. He was the biggest of the 3, and something in the way he moved told Jake he was the leader. He reached down and grabbed the child by the arm. The child let out a cry of pain and tried to pull away. Jake felt something hot rise up in his chest. It was anger, real anger, the kind he had not felt in years. It burned through the numbness that had wrapped around his heart since Lily died. He stood up and stepped out of the trees. The hunters turned toward him. Their weapons came up fast, pointing at his chest. Jake kept walking until he was at the edge of the clearing, maybe 10 meters away. The leader tilted his head. Behind his red visor, Jake could not see his face. "Human," the leader said. His voice came through a speaker in his helmet, flat and cold. "This does not concern you. Walk away." Jake did not walk away. He looked at the child. Those amber eyes were fixed on him now, filled with something that might have been hope. The silver markings on the child's skin were pulsing fast, like a heartbeat. "Let her go," Jake said. The leader laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "You do not understand. This is licensed acquisition. We have papers. Everything is legal." Jake knew what that meant. Somewhere on some planet with corrupt officials, someone had stamped a piece of paper that said this child was property. It meant nothing. Papers did not make slavery right. Laws written by criminals were not laws at all. "I do not care about your papers," Jake said. "Let her go." The leader shook his head slowly. "You are one man with an old rifle. We are 3 with military equipment. This is not a fight you can win." "Maybe not," Jake said, "but I am going to try anyway." For a moment, no one moved. The jungle was silent around them. Even the animals seemed to be holding their breath. Then the leader made a gesture with his hand, and everything happened at once. The hunter on the right raised his weapon. Jake dove to the side just as a blast of plasma burned through the air where he had been standing. He hit the ground, rolled, and came up firing. His first shot caught the right hunter in the chest. The pulse round punched through the armor and dropped him to the ground. Before Jake could aim again, the left hunter fired. The blast caught Jake in the shoulder, spinning him around. Pain exploded through his body like fire. Jake fell to one knee. His left arm went numb. Blood soaked through his shirt, but he did not stop. He raised his rifle with his right hand, braced it against his body, and fired twice. The left hunter went down. That left the leader. He was faster than the others. He had already moved to the side, using the fallen tree as cover. The child was between them now, frozen in fear. The leader aimed his weapon at Jake. "Impressive, but this ends now." Jake looked at the child. Those amber eyes were so much like Lily's eyes, so full of fear, so desperate for someone to help. He thought about his daughter. He thought about how she had died alone, scared, with no one to protect her. He thought about how he had failed her. He was not going to fail this child. Jake charged. The leader fired, but Jake was already moving, zigzagging across the clearing. The blast missed him by inches. Then he was too close for the weapon to matter. Jake tackled the leader hard, driving them both to the ground. They rolled in the dirt, fighting for control. The leader was strong, but Jake had something he did not have. Jake had nothing left to lose. He grabbed the leader's helmet and slammed it against a rock. Once, twice, 3 times, the visor cracked. The leader went limp. Jake lay there for a moment, breathing hard. His shoulder was burning. His whole body was shaking. Blood dripped from his wound onto the ground. Then he heard a small sound behind him. He turned his head. The child was standing a few meters away, watching him with those huge amber eyes. The silver markings had stopped pulsing so fast. They glowed steady now, soft and careful. Jake pushed himself up to his knees. Every movement hurt. He looked at the child and tried to remember how to smile. It had been a long time. "It is okay," he said. His voice was rough and tired. "I am not going to hurt you." The child did not move. Of course, she did not understand his words. They were from different worlds, different species. They shared nothing. But somehow, something passed between them anyway. Maybe it was the tone of his voice. Maybe it was the fact that he had just risked his life for her. Maybe it was something else entirely. The child took one small step forward, then another. Then she was standing right in front of him, looking up at his face with an expression he could not read. Jake held out his good hand, palm up, an offering, a promise. The child looked at his hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her small lavender fingers in his palm. Jake closed his hand gently around hers. "Come on," he said softly, "let us get out of here." Together, the lonely human and the lost alien child walked out of the clearing, leaving the fallen hunters behind them. The jungle closed around them like a curtain, hiding them from the world. For the first time in 3 years, Jake Collins was not alone. And for the first time since she had been taken, the child felt something like safe. The walk back to the outpost was slow and painful. Jake's shoulder throbbed with every step. Blood had soaked through his shirt and was dripping down his arm. He kept pressure on the wound with his right hand while the child walked beside him, her small fingers wrapped around 2 of his. She did not let go of him the whole way. Every time a sound came from the jungle, her grip tightened. Jake understood. She had been hunted. She had been scared. Holding on to someone safe was the only comfort she had right now. When they reached the outpost, Jake led her inside and sat her down on a chair near the window. She looked around at the room with wide eyes, taking in the strange human technology that surrounded her. The monitors, the equipment, the lights that turned on by themselves. Everything was new and foreign to her. Jake found his medical kit and sat down across from her. His shoulder was bad. The plasma burn had gone deep, cooking the flesh. It needed proper treatment at a real hospital. But the nearest hospital was months away, and Jake had to work with what he had. He pulled out the burn gel and the bandages. The child watched him with curious eyes as he cleaned the wound. When he winced in pain, she made a small sound of concern. It was the first noise she had made since the scream in the jungle. Jake looked at her and tried to smile again. It came a little easier this time. "It looks worse than it is," he said, even though they both knew that was a lie. He finished bandaging his shoulder and then turned his attention to her. She had some small cuts on her arms and legs from running through the jungle. Nothing serious, but they needed to be cleaned. Jake held up the medical kit and pointed to her injuries, then pointed to himself and the bandage on his shoulder. She understood. She held out her arm and let him work. As he cleaned her cuts, Jake studied her more closely. Her skin was soft and cool to the touch, not warm like human skin. The silver markings on her body formed patterns that seemed to mean something. They curved around her arms and up her neck, disappearing into her hair, which was dark purple and fell past her shoulders. Her ears were pointed, her nose small, and her mouth curved in a way that made her look thoughtful even when she was not thinking about anything. On her left forearm there was a different marking. This one was not silver like the others. It was burned into her skin, a spiral pattern that looked like it had been put there by force. The skin around it was rough. Jake pointed to it gently. "What is this?" The child looked down at the marking. Her expression changed. The curiosity left her eyes, replaced by something darker. She shook her head and pulled her arm away. Jake did not push. Everyone had pain they did not want to talk about. He knew that better than anyone. When he finished with her injuries, he went to the kitchen area and found some food. He was not sure what she could eat. He brought out several different things and placed them in front of her. Some dried fruit, some bread, some vegetables from the hydroponic garden he kept in the back room. She sniffed each item carefully before choosing. The fruit seemed to please her. She ate it slowly, watching Jake the whole time like she expected him to change his mind and become dangerous. Jake sat across from her and ate some bread. His stomach was not really interested in food, but he needed to keep his strength up. The fight had taken a lot out of him, and his shoulder was not going to heal quickly. When they finished eating, Jake pointed to himself. "Jake," he said clearly. "My name is Jake." The child tilted her head. Her silver markings pulsed once softly. Jake pointed at himself again. "Jake." She seemed to understand. She placed a hand on her own chest and made a sound. It was like wind blowing through glass, a musical chime that rose and fell in a way Jake's human throat could not copy. He tried anyway. He failed badly. The sound that came out of his mouth was flat and ugly compared to what she had said. But she smiled. It was a small smile, just a tiny curve of her lips, but it was real. It was the first sign of happiness he had seen from her. Jake thought for a moment. "I will call you Sira," he said. "Is that okay?" She did not understand the words, but she heard him say the name. She said it back, her accent making it sound like music. "Sira," Jake said again. "Sira," she agreed. It was not much, just a name shared between two beings who could not really talk to each other, but it felt like something. It felt like a start. That night Jake gave Sira his bed. It was the only comfortable place to sleep in the outpost, and she needed rest more than he did. She curled up under the blanket, her silver markings dimming to a soft glow as she drifted toward sleep. Jake sat in a chair by the door with his rifle across his lap. One of the hunters had escaped. They were known for not giving up on valuable prey. If the survivor went for help, more hunters could arrive within days. Jake was not sure what he would do if that happened. He was one man with a wounded shoulder and an old weapon. He had been lucky tonight. Luck did not last forever. But he pushed those thoughts away. Tomorrow was tomorrow. Tonight he had a child to protect. That was enough to focus on. As the hours passed, Jake found himself watching Sira sleep. Her breathing was slow and steady. Her face was peaceful in a way it had not been when she was awake. She looked young, so young. He thought about Lily again. His daughter would have been about this age now if she had lived. She would have been curious and kind, just like her mother. She would have loved the glowing plants of 7. She would have wanted to learn about every strange creature in the jungle. Jake's eyes burned, but he did not cry. He had used up all his tears long ago. Instead, he made a promise, not out loud but in his heart where it mattered. He would keep Sira safe. He did not know where she came from or how to get her back there. He did not know who her family was or if they were even alive. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was that she was here and she was counting on him. He had failed Lily. He had not been there when she needed him most. He would not fail Sira. The twin moons of 7 rose high in the sky, filling the outpost with silver light. Outside, the jungle hummed with life. Inside, a broken human and a lost alien child rested together, neither of them alone anymore. Morning would bring new challenges, new dangers, new questions without answers. But for now, for this one night, they had each other. And somehow that was enough. Dawn came with the sound of alarms. Jake woke from a light sleep in his chair, his hand already reaching for his rifle before his eyes were fully open. The perimeter sensors were screaming. Something had triggered them, something big. He moved to the monitoring station, ignoring the pain that shot through his wounded shoulder. The screen showed a single heat signature standing at the edge of the clearing, about 50 meters from the outpost's front door, just standing there, not moving. Jake felt his stomach tighten. One signature could mean the escaped hunter had come back alone for revenge, or it could mean something worse. Scout first, report back, bring the whole team later. Tactics. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, staying low. What he saw made him stop breathing. The figure standing at the edge of the clearing was not a hunter. She was tall, almost 2 meters, with the same lavender skin and silver markings that Sira had. But where Sira's markings were delicate and soft, this figure's markings covered her body like war paint. They blazed with inner light, bright enough to see clearly even in the morning sun. They swirled across her arms, her face, her neck, pulsing with power that Jake could feel even through the walls of the outpost. She wore armor that looked like it had grown from her own body. It was dark purple, almost black, fitted perfectly to her form. In her hands she held a staff taller than she was. Energy crackled around its tip, sparking and dancing like trapped lightning. Her eyes were amber, the same color as Sira's, but there was nothing childlike in those eyes. They were old, cold, dangerous. They were the eyes of someone who had seen more death than Jake could imagine. And they were pointed directly at his outpost. Jake had never seen a before. No human he knew had. They were legends, stories told by traders in bars at the edge of space. Some said they were ancient warriors who could kill a dozen soldiers without slowing down. Some said they were protectors of lost children and hidden places. Some said they were both. Looking at the figure in his clearing, Jake believed all of it. He heard movement behind him. Sira had woken up. She came to the window, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and looked out. The moment she saw the figure, everything changed. Sira let out a cry, not a cry of fear this time, a cry of recognition. Before Jake could react, she was running for the door. "Sira, wait," he called, but she did not stop. She threw open the door and ran out into the morning light, sprinting toward the warrior in the clearing. Jake followed, rifle raised, certain he was about to watch something terrible happen. The warrior saw Sira coming. For a moment her expression did not change. Then something cracked in that cold face. The blazing markings softened. The ancient eyes filled with emotion. The warrior dropped to one knee, opening her arms. Sira crashed into her, wrapping her small arms around the warrior's neck. They held each other tight, speaking rapidly in a language Jake did not understand. It was musical, like Sira's name, but deeper and more complex. The warrior's voice shook in a way that surprised Jake. This was someone who had seen everything, feared nothing, and right now she sounded like she was about to cry. Jake lowered his rifle. Whatever was happening here, it was not a threat, not to Sira anyway. After a long moment, the warrior rose to her feet with Sira still holding onto her. She turned her amber eyes to Jake. The coldness was back, but it was different now. There was something else mixed in. Curiosity, maybe respect. "You are the human," she said. Her English was accented but clear. Jake wondered how she knew his language, then decided it did not matter. "Yes," he said. "You killed the hunters." It was not a question. Jake nodded anyway. The warrior studied him. Her gaze moved over his bandaged shoulder, his old rifle, his tired face. She was measuring him, Jake realized, trying to understand how this one battered human had done what he did. "I am," she said. "I am the guardian of the I tribe. I have served for 200 of your years." Jake did the math in his head. 200 years. This being had been protecting her people since before his great-great-grandparents were born. The weight of that time was visible in her eyes, if you knew how to look. "Sira," Jake said, pointing to the child. "That is what I call her. I do not know her real name." His expression softened slightly as she looked down at the girl. "Her name is Daughter of the High Elder of our tribe. She was taken from us during a raid by the 30 cycles ago." 30 cycles. On 7, that was almost a standard year. Jake tried to imagine what the child had been through in that time. Captured, caged, transported across space as cargo, hunted through the jungle like an animal. The thought made his chest hurt. "We have searched for her without rest," continued. "Many believed she was already dead. I did not accept that." Her markings pulsed once fiercely. "I have never accepted that." Sira tugged on his arm and began speaking rapidly again. She pointed at Jake, at his shoulder at the outpost. She made gestures that Jake recognized from their night together, mimicking the fight, the medical treatment, the food. Listened without interrupting. When Sira finished, the warrior was silent for a moment. Then she approached Jake. She moved like water, smooth and controlled. Every step was deliberate. Jake had to fight the urge to raise his rifle again. Something in his brain was screaming that this being could kill him in half a heartbeat if she wanted to. She stopped at arm's length. This close, Jake could feel the heat coming off her markings. It was like standing near a fire. The hunter who escaped said, "You were worried he would bring others." Jake had been worried about exactly that. Yes. "He will not," paused. "I found him at dawn. He is no longer a concern." The way she said it told Jake everything he needed to know. He did not ask for details. "You could have ignored the child's screams," said. "You could have let the hunters take her. You could have stayed hidden and safe. You did not." Jake thought about that moment in his outpost, the hand on the button, the scream cutting through the night, the choice that had not felt like a choice at all. "No," he said quietly, "I could not." Studied him again. This time there was no measuring, no calculation. She was looking at him the way you look at something unexpected, something that does not fit in the box you built for it. "Among my people," she said, "there is no greater honor than protecting a child. You did this without knowing who was, without expecting reward, without hesitation." Her voice dropped, becoming almost gentle. "In 4,000 years of our history, very few outsiders have shown such courage." Jake did not know what to say. He had not thought about courage when he ran into the jungle. He had just heard a scream and moved. "I failed to protect my own daughter," he said. The words came out before he could stop them. "A long time ago. I was not there when she needed me." His eyes changed. The coldness faded entirely, replaced by something that looked almost like sorrow, understanding, recognition. "That pain lives in you," she said. "I can see it. It has shaped you into what you are." Jake nodded. His throat felt tight. "The I know about loss," continued. "We have seen empires rise and fall. We have buried generations of our own children. We know that grief does not make someone weak. It makes them dangerous. And sometimes it makes them kind." She reached out and placed her hand on his good shoulder. Her touch was warm, almost hot but not unpleasant. "You saved the daughter of our High Elder. You fought against impossible odds. You showed mercy to a stranger when you could have shown nothing." Her grip tightened slightly. "That debt will not be forgotten. The I remember." Jake looked at Sierra, standing beside with hope shining in her amber eyes. He had thought he came to 7 to disappear. Maybe he had come here to be found. Stayed at the outpost for 3 days. During that time, Jake learned more about the I than any human had ever known. They were ancient. Their civilization had existed for over 10,000 years, spreading across dozens of star systems before most spacefaring species had learned to make fire. They had seen everything. They had built empires and watched them crumble. They had fought wars that lasted centuries and made peace that lasted longer. They had been as gods by young races and hunted as demons by fearful ones. Eventually, they had grown tired of it all. 3,000 years ago, the I had withdrawn from the galaxy. They had hidden their worlds behind barriers that no scanner could penetrate. They had stopped trading, stopped talking, stopped caring about what happened beyond their borders. Let the young races fight their wars and make their mistakes. The I would watch from a distance and remember. But they had not become cold. That was what surprised Jake the most. Because we were weary," explained one evening, sitting across from him while Sierra played with some tools she had found in Jake's workshop. "Not because we stopped caring. We care too much. That was the problem. We saw suffering everywhere and could not fix it all. So we chose to protect our own and leave the rest to fate." Jake understood that better than he wanted to admit. He had done the same thing when he came to 7. Withdrawn, hidden. Let the universe do whatever it wanted while he sat alone with his grief. "What will happen to the hunters?" he asked. The expression darkened. Her markings pulsed with angry light. "The High Elder has already sent warriors to destroy the operation that took. By the time they realize their mistake, it will be too late. They will learn that stealing a child of the I has consequences." Jake thought about the ruthless efficiency of that response. They had been raiding and slaving for generations. They had bribed their way out of justice countless times. And now, because they had taken the wrong child, they were going to face something they could not buy off or outrun. Part of him felt uneasy about it. Part of him felt satisfied. "They are not the only ones who prey on children," he said. Nodded slowly. "No, they are not. The galaxy is full of darkness, Jake Collins. We cannot fight it all, but we can fight some of it. And sometimes one person standing up against evil is enough to start a fire that burns away the shadows." She looked at him with those ancient amber eyes. "You started such a fire when you saved." On the third morning, told Jake it was time to leave. A ice ship was waiting in orbit, hidden from any scanner that might be watching. They would take Sierra home to her family. Her father was waiting. Her people were waiting. Jake walked with them to the edge of the clearing where the transport would land. Sierra held his hand the whole way, her small fingers tight around his. He had known this moment would come. He had tried to prepare himself for it. But now that it was here, he found that he was not ready at all. When they reached the landing site, stopped and turned to face him. "You have a choice," she said. Jake frowned. "What choice?" "You may stay here in your exile, continue your life as it was, alone with your machines and your grief," paused, "or you may come with us." Jake stared at her. "Come with you." "To our world, to our people." His voice was calm, but there was weight behind her words. "I do not make such offers lightly. In 4,000 years, we have extended sanctuary to outsiders only twice before. Both times, the outsiders had earned it through extraordinary acts of courage and compassion." Jake did not know what to say. He looked at Sierra, who was watching him with hopeful eyes. She did not understand everything that was being said, but she understood enough. She wanted him to come. She was afraid of losing the first person who had made her feel safe since she was taken. "I am just a surveyor," Jake said. "I am not special. I just heard a scream and ran toward it." "Yes," said, "that is exactly why you are special." She stepped closer to him. Her markings glowed softly in the morning light. "Among my people, there is a saying. The measure of a soul is not what it does when it is watched. It is what it does when it believes no one will ever know. You believed you were going to die in that clearing. You believed no one would ever find out what you did. You charged into that fight anyway." Jake remembered the moment. The leader's weapon pointed at his chest, the child behind him, the certainty that he was about to die. He had not hesitated. "You did not fight because you wanted to be a hero," continued. "You fought because you could not let a child suffer while you did nothing. That is rare, Jake Collins, rarer than you know." Jake looked around at the clearing, at the outpost that had been his home for 3 years, at the jungle that had been his whole world. He thought about Lily, about the empty coffins he had buried because their bodies were never found. He thought about the years he had spent running away from everything, the silence that had become his companion, the grief that had become his identity. He thought about Sierra, looking up at him with those amber eyes that reminded him so much of his daughter. "I never expected to matter again," he said quietly. Smiled. It was a small smile, but it transformed her face completely. For a moment, she did not look like an ancient warrior. She looked like someone who understood exactly what he was feeling. "You matter," she said. "You saved a child from monsters. You showed kindness when you had no reason to. You proved that even the loneliest heart can hold courage." Her voice softened. "Among the eye, that is not nothing. That is everything." Jake looked at Sierra one more time. She squeezed his hand tight. He thought about his wife, who had always said that healing meant moving towards something, not away from everything. He made his choice. 3 hours later, Jake Collins left 7 for the last time. He did not look back at the outpost that had been his prison. He did not say goodbye to the jungle or the twin moons or the silence that had kept him company for so long. Instead, he looked forward, at the small lavender hand holding his, at the ancient warrior walking beside them, at the ship rising into the sky, carrying them toward a world he had never known existed. The eye had watched the galaxy for thousands of years. They had seen the worst of what sentient beings could do to each other. They had grown weary of the endless cycle of cruelty and suffering. But Jake Collins had shown them something they had almost forgotten. He had shown them that courage did not require strength, that kindness did not require reward, that sometimes the most broken hearts were the ones most capable of love. On the eye, Jake would become legend, not as a warrior or a general, not as a scholar or a diplomat, but as something rarer. He would become the human who reminded an ancient people that the youngest species in the galaxy still had something to teach them. The eye had thought they knew everything about courage. They had thought they had seen every kind of heroism. They were wrong. A lonely man in an empty outpost heard a child scream and ran into the darkness to save her. That was all. That was everything. And the eye would remember it forever. In the end, Jake Collins did not find what he was looking for on 7. He did not find peace or forgetting or an escape from his pain. He found something better. He found a reason to keep going. He found a people who valued what he had thought was worthless. He found a family to replace the one he had lost. And he found out that humans, with all their flaws and fears and broken hearts, still had the power to make ancient civilizations stop and pay attention. Not through weapons or technology or conquest. Through simple, stubborn, extraordinary compassion. That was the human way. And it was enough.